The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. With this premise begins the manifesto of a Harvard mathematician turned philosopher, an activist who planted more than 16 bombs in the United States to raise interest in what he believed was the rampant dissolution of human dignity due to technology, endowed with supreme intelligence and severe deficiencies in forming emotional bonds. His message resonated and continues to resonate with those who feel there is something deeply inhuman about the course civilization is taking, as well as our relationship with technology, in those who, nostalgic, see the human bonds of an old way of life that seems to be extinguishing. Ted Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber, claimed that technology would invade every aspect of human behavior, denaturing human relationships and enabling the powerful to exercise a level of surveillance and control never seen before. He stated that we have ended up servants of our technical inventions instead of our technical inventions serving us. At the same time as man becomes increasingly isolated and traditional bonds are destroyed. Many are aware of his attacks, which left dozens of innocent victims, and the shock they caused to the country and the Federal Bureau of Investigation for decades. But how did a man come to such actions? And what were the premises of his ideas, which today still have detractors and supporters? Today we are going to learn about the history and thought of Ted Kaczynski, so we invite you to stay until the end of the video, which is well worth it. This is Reynaldo Carrillo speaking for the New Encyclopedia, and we invite you to like this video, leave your comments, share it with your acquaintances, hit the bell, so you get the notifications and support us on our Patreon so we can continue to bring you exclusive and quality material for everyone. Fyodor John Kaczynski was born on May 22, 1942, during the peak of World War II. His parents were relatively poor workers, descendants of a Polish family. Both atheists, converted from their Catholic upbringing. Their neighbors described them as self-sacrificing and very civic-minded parents. However, in future testimonies from his psychiatric evaluation, Ted would show great resentment towards his parents, whom he accused of having treated him very badly as a young man. The directors of the school where Ted attended elementary school described him as a mature and healthy child. In 1952, Kaczynski skipped the 6th grade because he achieved an astonishing 167 on the intelligence quotient test. Ted would move to a classroom where everyone was older than him, and he would struggle to fit in more than he already did with others. He was described as very smart but very lonely. This frustration, not feeling a part of anything, he drained it with problematic behaviors such as building a homemade bomb. In chemistry class, he always academically stood out above everyone else. In high school, he developed a great fondness for mathematics and spent his time solving complex problems. This while playing the trombone in the school band and being a member of several German biology clubs, among others. He graduated at only 15 years old after skipping the 11th grade. And with his short life experience, he was accepted with a scholarship at the prestigious Harvard University. In the corridors where the most elite minds of the United States would end up, Kaczynski maintained his reputation as a brilliant but socially introverted person. There he participated in a curious and rustic experiment of the psychology department, which is worth mentioning. Participants in this experiment had to write their philosophical beliefs and personal life aspirations in an essay, under the pretext that this essay would be used by other students to debate it with its authors. Meanwhile, an electrical conductor recorded the person's brain reactions to whom was being questioned. What they didn't know is that at the time of the alleged debate, there would be an anonymous debater who would use these essays to attack and humiliate the participants. Meanwhile, they were even filmed in the midst of anger and confusion by what this interlocutor was telling them. Kaczynski was the subject of this experiment for 200 hours over several months. Kaczynski's lawyers in the future used these experiments to justify Ted's violent rejection of psychological control methods. Although Kaczynski has been emphatic that these alleged experiments did not affect the course of his life, sources have even stated that this Harvard study was allegedly part of the CIA's mind control experiments, known as Mind Control Ultra, During the 60s in 1962, at the age of 20, Kaczynski becomes a Harvard graduate mathematician, then goes on to earn a master's and a doctorate in the same field at the University of Michigan, where he is offered a position as a professor. Different teachers spoke about Ted's unique character and how he focused like no other on his work and on discovering mathematical truths. A teacher wrote in his annual evaluation that it is not enough to say that he is smart, he's the best man I have ever seen. While all this, Kaczynski rather believed that the university had low standards. Kaczynski always had trouble developing deep bonds with people, especially with women, which he attributes to his mom's verbal abuses during childhood. At the time of his future arrest decades later, Kaczynski had never had a girlfriend, an aspect that reflected the strong internal conflicts of his person. In future psychiatric evaluations, Ted confessed it, in which he recounted having had serious disputes with his sexual and gender identity, even having intense fantasies of being a woman. While studying at the University of Michigan, he even arranged a consultation with a psychiatrist to get approval for a possible operation and hormonal medication. While awaiting the consultation, Kaczynski claims he had a change of heart, according to his own writings. In the future, I open quotes, "As I was leaving the building, I felt disgusted, as my uncontrollable sexual desires almost led me to be humiliated, and I felt a strong hatred towards the psychiatrist. At that moment, a turning point arrived in my life. Like a phoenix, I sprouted from the ashes of my despair a glorious new hope." End quote. It was at that moment that Kaczynski would begin to plan his escape to the wild, from where he would gain national and international notoriety. For his turbulent actions and for his ideas, for which we invite you to stay until the end of this video. For the time being, at 25 years old, you get the position of mathematics teacher at the prestigious University of California. Despite this, he seemed uncomfortable with the role of teacher. He taught directly from the book and did not like to answer questions. It was during this period when suddenly Kaczynski submits his resignation. In a letter from that year, the mathematics department head said the resignation was unexpected. There he also said that Kaczynski seemed pathologically shy to him, and despite the attempts of his colleagues, he did not see him form a friendship with anyone. After this resignation, inexplicable to his relatives, he moved to his parents' house in Illinois. Kaczynski was always extremely analytical beyond mathematics, and he was about to prove it. A multitude of thoughts were running through his mind, and complex decisions were being made within him. 2 years after his resignation, he decides to move to a remote cabin he had been building on the outskirts of Montana. There he had no electricity or plumbing system, but he did have many books. He proposed to live a simple life, with little money, taking on unusual jobs and even receiving financial aid from his family. He would ride his bicycle to the town to read classic books in their original language at the public library. At that time, he deepened his interest in political philosophy and political sociology, including the works of a French sociologist named Jacques Ellul. Ellul was a philosopher associated with Christian anarchism, which is a sort of current that sees God as the only authority to whom man must answer. And also, he was a sociologist who frequently wrote about the emergence of a technological tyranny in the 20th century. The book The Technological Society by Jacques Ellul became a kind of Bible for Ted, who saw there what he had been thinking for some time and would later develop in his famous Manifesto. As he would later explain to a national audience in the United States, Ted believed that technology and the machine have radically destabilized individuals as well as the way of life in society. The eruption of the Industrial Revolution has led to the formation of large urban conglomerates with high population density, with gigantic states out of public control, which has replaced small-scale community life as well as the connection with nature. The machine and technology do not exist to meet human needs, but we must change our behavior to satisfy the system. Industrial modernity has dissolved the extended family into the guild and community traditions, generating a multitude of human beings with psychological problems who feel disconnected from their immediate reality and with a purposeless life. Ted claimed that in the future, computer engineers would build increasingly intelligent machines, and society would progressively let these machines make decisions for them, thus losing their sovereignty. But we will return later to these premises of the Manifesto that earned him worldwide renown. Returning to his life in the wilderness, Ted's father was impressed with his survival skills in nature. Ted's original goal was to achieve self-sufficiency and live autonomously, but that was about to change. As early as 75, he sabotaged with fires and explosives the constructions that were intended to be carried out near the cabin he had. In turn, Kaczynski had developed a great affection for a place that was 2 days' walk from his cabin. A kind of plateau with a waterfall that became a favorite place for him. When seeking total solitude, one summer, Kaczynski, in search of peace, went to his dream place, only to find that they had built an asphalt road that went right through the middle of the place. Kaczynski recounts years later that this filled him with anger, and that at that moment he decided that he would no longer focus on improving his skills to live in nature, but would work on hitting back at the system, on revenge, in his words. There's no way to know for sure. The convergence of stimuli, reflections, delusions, and passions that led Ted to embark on the adventure of rebellion, philosophy, and terror he was about to embark on. What is certain is that in 1978, he began the saga of explosions and bombs that would make him one of the most wanted by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Between the year 78 and the year 95, TED sent or directly planted more than 16 bombs, almost all aimed at profiles such as engineering professors, airlines, or computer workers. The type of explosive device that Kaczynski used varied greatly over time. Each time they were more sophisticated technologies, and they were very meticulous, in order not to leave any trace, in addition to leaving false clues that confused the authorities for a long time. Did he used to stamp on them, on these bombs, the initials Freedom Club, which were the initials in English for the Freedom Club, according to him, he would tell in the future. His bombs took the lives of more than 3 people and seriously injured 23 more. His last 2 victims in '95 were a senior executive of a deforestation company and the director of a multinational public relations firm, who helped to cover up the Exxon Corporation in the media after an oil spill scandal. It is at this point that Kaczynski carries out an action that catapults him to fame as an activist intellectual. This year, Kaczynski sent numerous letters to media outlets stating that he would desist from further acts of terror if a large newspaper printed and published his 35,000-word essay titled Industrial Society and Its Future. The director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Attorney General agreed to have it published in the New York Times in the hope that some reader might be able to identify its author. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. With this premise, Kaczynski begins his famous Manifesto, which condensed his ideas of decades. The Manifesto presented a very well-articulated case against technological progress and the unprecedented disruptive effects this progress has caused in human relationships. According to Ted, the Industrial Revolution started a process that suppresses human nature and robs it of its fundamental freedoms. In addition to having destroyed the ecology and life in small-scale communities, humans have subjugated their mind and spirit to technology rather than subjugating technology to the needs of the human being. Every technological advance is seen as positive and desirable in itself, without considering the way it can seriously disrupt the way of life. For Kaczynski, our society is headed towards an increasing invasion and control of technology over all domains of human life, at the same time as the powers of the state and large corporations expand without precedent. All of this erodes human freedom, leaving fewer and fewer spaces free from the great technocratic machine, which in turn is hostile to the development of human potential, by logical consequence. And are scientists and technophiles responsible for wanting to amass more and more power and money at the cost of drastically disturbing the historical lifestyle of the people? Technology directs the efforts of men, increasingly isolated and from the rootless mass, towards fruitless practices and goals that do not satisfy the human soul, such as the consumption of banal entertainment and drugs, adherence to sports teams, as well as most of the political activism and scientific and academic work, which does not pursue a transcendental mission. He also prophesies that genetic engineering will spread over time. He calls for more primitive forms of life connected with nature, which for him is the antithesis of technology. In much of the Manifesto, Kaczynski also devotes himself to condemning what he considers all forms of the political left, as one of the broadest manifestations of the insanity of the modern world and the feeling of inferiority. He also condemns conservatives as, quote, fools who cry over the decay of traditional values, but at the same time they enthusiastically support technological progress and economic growth. Close quote. According to Ted, technology is not a series of neutral artifacts, but it has its own agenda and seeks to expand beyond the human. The system is not driven by political ideologies, but these are at the service of technological needs. This very superficially summarizes several of the main premises of this manifesto. That, far from being perceived as the work of a schizophrenic, the manifesto touched the intellectual and emotional fiber of many of its readers. Written 20 years before Seeing, world leaders openly promoting the gestation of babies within machines outside of the mother, or promoting the implantation of chips in our brain as something desirable. Also written long before the massive global surveillance network of the United States through the Internet was revealed. Soon after its publication, many websites emerged supporting the manifesto's ideas. Several renowned authors and columnists considered the text to be intellectually profound and completely lucid. Like the work of a philosophical criminal, highly intelligent and with humanitarian concerns, capable of causing the death of innocence in the name of a strong idealism. However, the violence against innocence around his ideas largely eclipsed the sympathies that could be generated towards him or his proposals in much of the public. After many years of relentless and costly Federal Bureau of investigation, which at times had a staff of 150 people full-time dedicated to his case, and with the collaboration of his younger brother David, who read the manifesto a week after it was published, at the suggestion of his wife and suspected it could be his brother, which led him to feel the duty to collaborate with the authorities, despite the fact that he deeply admired his older brother. Finally, Federal Bureau of Investigation agents found and arrested Ted Kaczynski in his cabin on April 3, 1996. It was the most expensive investigation in the history of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, only possible through the cunning genius of the perpetrator of these crimes. Kaczynski's sanity or mental insanity has been a topic of debate. His lawyers tried to appeal to an alleged psychiatric disorder to evade the death sentence, but Kaczynski refused this, rather asking that he be allowed to represent himself as an opportunity to spread his ideas, although this was denied by the jury. The official psychiatrists who evaluated him argued that Ted had paranoid schizophrenia or a schizoid personality disorder. However, in a 2010 book, Ted claims that two psychologists who frequently visited him in prison concluded he did not have any disorder, and that it was all a political maneuver to discredit his ideas. Numerous people throughout his life have pointed out that while he had strong psychological conflicts, internal struggles, and difficulties socializing with others, Kaczynski was a sane and rational person. The truth is that he was sentenced to 8 life sentences, which he continues to serve to this day at 81 years old. Once in prison, Kaczynski continued his philosophical work, clarifying and deepening his ideas and political philosophy, doubling down on his positions against the direction of society, adding to his famous essay Industrial Society and Its Future, a work from 2008 called The Road to Revolution, followed by Technological Slavery in 2008 as well, and The Anti-Tech Revolution, written in 2020. This in addition to frequent correspondence with some close associates who have preferred to keep their identity anonymous. In 2012, he wrote the directory for the annual meeting of his Harvard class of 1962 graduates, describing his occupation as a prisoner and listing his 8 life sentences as awards. The image of Ted Kaczynski has persisted in popular culture, and his intellectual work has attracted the interest of multiple authors and political groups of the most diverse nature, from anarchists and primitivists to conservatives, nationalists, and eco-fascists, as well as captivating ordinary mortals who can't stop watching a society sick in mind and spirit, alienated from a more dignified, healthier, and more natural life, mortals nostalgic for human connections, for a world that seems to have ceased to exist. What perhaps most disturbs some about Unabomber, this alleged madman, is that his ideas, far from being foreign, are extremely familiar to many, like a testament to the twilight of the most intimate part of our human nature at the hands of the industrial mega-machine. Ronaldo Carrillo spoke to them. We hope you liked this video. This is the new encyclopedia, and we invite you to like this video, to leave your comments, to hit the bell to receive notifications, and support us on our Patreon so we can continue to bring you high-quality videos. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time, and God bless you.